I have never used the information about our Native American heritage to get any advantage, not to apply to college, not to apply to law school, and not to get hired for any job. I was listed in a directory as, I listed myself as Native American. I was listed there. It's part of who I am.
Do you consider yourself a minority?
I consider myself as having a Native American background. That's what I said. That's what I am.
No one's questioning what her parents told her when she was younger or all the way through that time frame. But when she was asked by the Boston Herald, why is Harvard touting her as a minority, a woman of color, a Native American, she said she didn't know. And then after 5 weeks of misleading the papers and the reporters, she said, I self-reported. And she's never answered why she in fact did that.
Okay, one notable line came when Senator Brown was interrupted while trying to explain why he voted against Democratic-backed bills.
She's obviously misstating the facts. These were rejection by both Democrats and Republicans, Professor. It wasn't a... If you're going to comment on my record, I would at least have you refer to it. Excuse me. Excuse me. We're not.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. I'm not a student in your classroom. Please let me respond. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's just stop there for a second, because at the top of the show in our little sort of teaser item, I think you nailed it. I think he fell into a trap. Some might take issue with that, but there are dynamics between male and female politicians that you have to be extremely wary of.
Yeah, you just have to be very careful not to appear to be bullying or condescending, and I think he certainly looked condescending. Whether he looked bullying or not, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a pretty mild-mannered, nice guy.
Well, the trouble is he doesn't look like that in that clip. He looks like kind of a guy who's had it. This is a fascinating race. Mike is going to be the one that really has the last say because he's from Massachusetts, but I think this is a fascinating race. He's clearly making a place for the angry white working class people, and I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't think he's doing that. The biggest thing that he has going for him in a heavily Democratic state is the perception that he's a nice guy, that he's the nicer person of the two candidates. That shows up in all the polls. It shows up when you see them, when you encounter them on the street. What he does in the debates runs counter to that impression. And that's a dangerous sign for him. His biggest problem is going to be in Massachusetts. The President of the United States is going to crush the former governor of Massachusetts, and that numbers hill for Scott Brown to climb is a tremendous task. I'm surprised that it's been as close as it has been this long. Her biggest strength, one of her biggest strengths, is people in Massachusetts, their fear of a Republican Senate, a Republican-controlled Senate. What he's got going for him is people's instinct that it's nice to have a balance, Republicans and Democrats, and that the guy is bipartisan.
So why is this? What's the big deal about her Native American heritage? Why does Brown
I think that's a media obsession more than it is.
Well, but he's spending all his time going after her.
I agree with you.
Yes,
I agree with you.
Because he knows he's behind and he's got to do something, and there's a question as to whether she put it on a form or didn't put it on a form, or is or isn't. So he's trying to make something of it in politics, Howard. It's not the first time somebody has tried to do something like that. I think one of the other issues there is, though, he's obviously trying to portray himself as a centrist because of the politics of Massachusetts and talking about his bipartisan cooperation. But then last night he was asked who his favorite Supreme Court justice was, and he said Scalia. And then he quickly pivoted, but that's not going to play that well in Massachusetts. And, you know, he's obviously trying to portray her as an elite Harvard, very left-wing kind of academic. But as you say, I think it's unfortunately looking really tough for him.
Yeah.
Wasn't Elizabeth Warren fantastic, Steve Ratner?
She's a lovely person. I'm sure she's a lovely.
You agree with me, right?
She's a fantastic person?
Yes, and a fantastic candidate.
I think she's a fantastic candidate. I think she's an amazing woman. I think she's formidable, and I disagree with her on about 75% of her views, at least on how the economy and the financial industry should be.
Which is exactly, of course, why I like her.
Exactly. I like her a lot, too. I've been very clear about that.
The irony here is if you listen to her, if you draw her out, she is far to the left of where most voters are in that state. It's sort of interesting.
Well, on what issue?
I think she's even to the left of Howard Dean.
Come on now.
No, seriously, what issues? I mean, I think people have had it up to here with Wall Street and with consumer protection, and those are her strong issues.
Look, so where is she? She's fine on consumer protection, but she would break up the banks.
Well, so would I.
Well, okay, fine.
No, I mean, they're too big to fail. They're not capitalist institutions anymore. They're too big to fail.
We can all go over to CNBC and have this debate, but the fact is, I'm not sure that the average Massachusetts voter would want to radically restructure the financial industry to the extent she would. And remember, Boston does not have a small financial services community, and I don't think she's going to get a lot of votes there.
Willie, wasn't Elizabeth Warren fantastic?
She was good. He had that one moment where he didn't look his best when he said, "I'm not in one of your classrooms," but we all know what he's doing when he calls her professor. Right. She's an outsider. She's Harvard. She's not us. She's not one of us.
That was clearly a line applied to him.
Of course.
Right. He kept calling her professor.
That came out of the Romney Zinger camp, right? That was a list.
How does that play in Boston, though? That broader concept that she's not really one of us. If Scott Brown looks and winks at the camera, she's a nice lady. She's very smart, but she's not one of us. That's what he's saying, essentially.
Well, you know, in parts of Boston, it's going to play very well. In parts of Cambridge, it's not going to play well at all. But again, it gets to the numbers game. He has two counties in Boston that are heavily tilted against him. Suffolk County, Boston proper, Middlesex, Cambridge, and the western suburbs. And the numbers are so horrendously stacked against any Republican, not just Scott Brown, that he's got a really tough.
Are you basically saying that if there's going to be a huge presidential turnout, and that's what's in those two counties, and that's what's going to swamp? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I thought that was a weird poll, 43-38. That many people undecided in a race like this. I was very surprised.
That's his whole card right now.
That's his hope.
Let's show a little more of the debate last night. Elizabeth Warren ran into a bit of trouble with a question about who from the other party she would work with if elected to the Senate.
Can you name some Republicans in the Senate today that you are able to work with on big issues, substantive issues that the country faces?
I think probably Richard Lugar would be one that would come to mind.
He's not going to be there.
He's not going to be there.
Who else could you name, Senator?
That is a problem. Let me do this one slightly. Let me just
ask the question, though. Are there any Republicans who are actually going to be in the Senate that you feel you could work with substantively and compromise with?
Look, it depends on what the subject matter is.
But this is precisely the point, right? This is the point that she isn't going to work with the other party. She's out there on the edge, and voters are going to have to take that into account when they decide how badly they want a Democratic senator.
Okay, but counter to that, she actually built something that is really all about protecting the middle class, protecting the American people from voracious appetites of banks and greedy Wall Streeters. She has done things that have showed that she's not there out on the edge. She's fighting for people. I agree. It's going to be tough for her to get in there and learn how to do it. But you know what? Look at Scott Brown.
You know, there's a lot of people out there, Democrats, not the only ones, including Tea Party people, who are sick of politicians who go over to Washington and work with the right wing. There are a lot of people who just say, why don't you stand up for what you believe in? And there's nobody's going to argue that Elizabeth Warren's not going to stand up for what she believes in.
Back, Calissa Gingrich joins us on set along with the Financial Times.